this is Shanti with Earth.Centric, my first Earth-Centric YouTube for the YouTube channel. I also have a podcast on Spotify where you can find a lot of really interesting topics that are all about Earth-centered thinking as opposed to human-centered thinking. So to try to get us out of this paradigm that is put humans at the center of importance and at the peak of creation, that has led us into all the problems that we're having to deal with today. So in that, I have the pleasure of having Simon Bull come on to talk today about eco villages and his particular magic formulation of 144,000 eco villages. It was by a certain date, right, Simon? And
Yep.
yeah, what that's all about. So Simon, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Shanti. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So what's your background, Simon?
Well, my background in terms of formulating my Eco Village thinking and model is that always been a bit of a gypsy and a bit of a hippie and at heart. I used to be a musician back when I was a teenager and in my early years, and then I joined the Hare Krishna movement. Did all that sort of stuff. What's the old story? I think in the olden days, you say, if you're not a communist by the time you're 20, you've got no heart. And if you're not a capitalist by the time you're 30, you've got no brain. So that's the old way of putting it. So the new
Never
way of
heard
putting
that.
it is if you haven't joined an Eastern religion by the time you're 20, you've got no heart. And if you haven't figured out how to turn it all into a business by the time you're 30, you've got no brain. But so anyway, I did all that stuff. I was very much interested in Eastern mysticism. Spent 3 years living in a temple. Did all that stuff. I jokingly say I got my BA up in Hinduism, and learned a few of the words, etc. And came out of that period. I was living in the temple in King's Cross, and I jumped ship and went off and joined the Earth Repair Foundation. And they're an environmental organisation. Before I did that, between the Haris and the Earth Repair Foundation, I did have a gig as a sales marketing manager for an import wholesale company, which is when I started getting into, the corporate world, sales and marketing, all that jazz. Bit of a big difference between being a transcendentalist and being into business and stuff. But, I was leaping out into the Western world into the 80s when all the greed is good decade was in full swing. And so that's what I did. But very quickly decided that I wanted to do something for the environment and to, work with the planet and all that jazz. And ended up at the Earth Repair Foundation at that time. And that was in the early 90s. And I was there for only a year, but I got very deeply into the whole code of environmentalism, global environmentalism, and the big issue that really was evident to me at that time, Shanti, was the whole idea of biodiversity loss on the planet. And, whereas global warming was sort of put forward as being a scary thing that was going to happen, I sort of saw that that was really much further off down the track, that the thing that we needed to concern ourselves with in the first place was biodiversity loss, the extinction of species, right? And that, to me, that was the big problem. And indeed, in the global environmental reports that I was reading, that was the big problem too. Not only did it appeal to me on a sort of an emotional level, but intellectually it stacked up, that human beings are the sixth big extinction event to happen on the planet. There's been several of them, or six of them. We're the sixth one. I think the meteors and the dinosaurs was one. All that stuff, that whole history of we go through this thing called punctuated evolution on planet Earth. We've been going through this series of evolutionary steps. It doesn't just happen in one smooth curve, but there have been these moments when maybe the asteroid or an asteroid's hit the Earth and we went through a period of dramatic change in the biological makeup of life on Earth. And we get to where we are now, and human beings seem to be the cause of a massive extinction of species, to the point where with overdevelopment on the planet, we're looking at the extinction of species rate that's stepped up from a natural rate of somewhere around, one a month or something like that. I mean, there is a natural rate of extinction of species.
Yeah,
and evolution
the
of new
background
species.
rate. It's we're
The
we're
background
doing
rate,
it 10 times faster than the background rate.
at least 10 times faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
The analogy that I used to hear back in the day was like, the destruction of, let's just say, put it in terms of rainforest, it's like some giant monster was out there destroying a football field of rainforest every, 3 seconds.
Literally.
One, two,
We've
three.
created the giant monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, we're the monster. Yeah, exactly. Human beings are the giant monster. And so with the destruction of that much, wilderness area in terms of, and overdevelopment for whatever you want, housing or raising cattle for beef burgers or corn or, any of those things, or all and any of those things, we get to this point where, human beings, more or less guilty as charged, we are the sixth great extinction event, and we are driving planetary biodiversity to such a low point that the ecological web, if you think of what we're doing as being sort of tearing that web and punching holes in it with our sort of out of control human so-called development and growth activities.
And
Can we?
I just want to interject there. It's not as simple as growth and development and clearing. It's also just things that we don't think about. Like I read that book of this on the sixth mass extinction, and she talks about this species of all the species of frogs disappeared and an entire state in South America. I can't remember what state it was. A while back I read it.
Doesn't matter, but
a country.
Yes.
Yeah, so they
Sounds very
found
familiar.
that the frogs were decimated because
Mm.
people traveling and moving around from country to country was spreading a fungus that was killing the frogs. So
There you
it's
go. Just
things
something
like
as
this
simple as travel.
we don't even think about. Like we think, oh yeah, traveling's great. That's like the pinnacle of life for most people is I want to travel, I want to, move around as much as possible on the planet, but very few people realize how much damage that does. And it's not just emissions.
For sure.
So I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so, that's what we've been doing. We've been destroying biodiversity. So I made it my sort of, I had a bee in my bonnet about that. I had a passionate bee in my bonnet about that. That, I really felt like I want to discover the solution to the biodiversity crisis. And at the point when I actually, I'd been in the Harris, I'd been in corporate sales and marketing. Now I'm with the Earth Repair Foundation, and I tumbled out of there back to Sydney. So that was up in the Blue Mountains. And I fell back down into Sydney, and I was like, well, I'm going to go and make, films and corporate videos was what I did as the starting, as the on-ramp into that. And I did. I started a corporate video production company, and that didn't actually make any films, as it turned out. But I did spend 3 years making corporate videos, which was good, experience. I did make one documentary. But along the way, I always had inside of me this idea that I'm going to find the solution to the biodiversity crisis. It's just something that was there running inside of me. And oh boy, the remaining meeting time, 9 minutes and 53 seconds. Is I better go fast. Um, and anyway, so I stumbled upon this in a textbook. I was studying biology, and the first chapter was about the living cell. And I noticed that, the living cell can do 180,000 things simultaneously, Shaunti. 180,000 things. And being at that point in not just corporate video, but, I was getting into consulting and that sort of marketing thing of consulting to businesses on business systems and marketing systems and all that sort of stuff. It's right in the thick of the corporate world. And I sort of thought, wow, if I could figure out what was going on in the cell as in terms of systems, we could learn a lot about business. We could apply that to business in an ecologically friendly sort of way. I just linked the two things together, you know what I mean? And so I really went down the rabbit hole with the cell. And so how do you untangle 180,000 things happening simultaneously? Because, that's a lot of spaghetti, right? If you think of it in terms of a data center with all the wires running around everywhere, it's like, that's going to do my head in trying to work that out. So I had to find a way of working that out. And I knew I would find that answer, or I had a strong suspicion, at the leading edge of theory. And what I found was this whole area of theoretical science called complexity science. And that incorporates quantum theory, chaos theory, and system theory. And from there, I was able to narrow my search down to this point where I had a series of breakthroughs, and then had this kind of breakthrough of a download because it was doing my head in trying to work it out. I actually had to leave my body, and this thing kind of funneled itself down through the top of my head. And when I sort of came to of that process, the whole model had downloaded itself into my brain, into my mind, in my physical brain, and I kind of, we've got to get back to the future, Marty. The quantum wobulator is broken. And I just started it was like that. And I just started writing it all down. I ended up spending a couple of years at the University of Technology, Sydney, writing that up as a theoretical model to explain what I'd been downloaded. But what I've been given is basically the fractal model of how everything works. So I was looking for this model for sustainability. And the answer that I got was that everything functions inside of nested fractals. And the simple way to look at this in terms of that will lead us straight to a view of the Eco Village, if you can just bear with me for one brief moment here, is that we look at the atom. That's the start of the universal fractal. The smallest level is the atom. The largest level in our cosmological terms would be the whole universe. Does that make sense? And in between the atom, the smallest iteration of the fractal, and the universe, the largest iteration of fractal by definition, right? There's all these different levels. And a good way of looking at that so we can understand that with our tiny brain is to say, well, the atom bears a relationship to the cell, which is actually where the mineral kingdom moves into the biological domain, right? From the atom to the cell. So if the atom is the basic unit of the mineral world, rocks and minerals, the cell is a basic atom of the biological domain. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And so the relationship between the atom and the cell is a similar relationship. And if you study it in terms of measurement, you would find there is actually a direct proportional relationship between the solar system and our galaxy. Okay. And so what that points to is the fact that the organization of optimum functioning for sustainability, which the cell is, right? The organization of optimal functioning for sustainability has already been worked out for us in advance, courtesy of the living universe.
Yeah.
And my model that I wrote up, it's called the evolutionary living fractal. So it's looking at the universe as a living model. If you want to get really far out, it's a hologram. But let's just think of it in terms of the living universe. So if we look at the cell as being the fundamental building block of life on Earth in biological terms, we look at an eco village, and the easiest way to do this is just get a picture of an eco village, like a graphic image, a design, a slide of an overview of an eco village. And this is the super shorthand version of 4 years of quantum theory, chaos theory, and system theory, all scrunched down into like 3 minutes. But you take a cross section of a living cell and you put it next to a map of an eco village, and you'll see there's a stunning sort of similarity. It's what a fractal is called, a model of self-same similarity. So how is it that's something on the microscopic level in terms of how the universe does sustainability and makes things function so that they work, and not just work, but continue to work and evolve, right? Because that's what we want to do as human beings. We want to not just work and destroy everything, but we want to evolve and be in harmony with the fractal of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah,
So,
I'm just now really curious what your ideal eco village would look like going on
well,
that.
this is a very good question. But so you grok the model of like, okay, cell eco village, they look the same. And that's called doing it that way, bypassing all the science. It's called biomimicry. So how does nature do it? And the lady that wrote the book on that's called Janine Benyus. There's I think, a 4-part series uh, produced by David Suzuki on this whole area of biomimicry with Janine Benyus. But so if we simply look at that model between the cell and the eco village, we can see that, in terms of being in harmony with the universe, being in harmony with life, being in harmony with the fractal of life, we should be doing, eco villages. But it is, and this is, I think, incredibly important to understand. It is at this point where we get to a fork in the road. And in terms of systems, we can go in two different ways. There are two different types of systems. We can go into cybernetic systems, which is sort of like what they're trying to do at the moment, on the planet, where they're trying to control everything and have, digital control systems and all that sort of stuff. That's the cybernetic control model. And then there's this other model, which is called complex adaptive living systems. And guess which one I'm more interested in?
I can guess.
Complex adaptive living systems. Now, I think that inevitably what's going to happen is we're going to have a bifurcation, and then we're going to have an integration. Because I don't think, it's no point in being a Luddite and saying, well, we're just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is part of our evolution. But what we don't want to do in our evolution of this beautiful systems function and understanding that, what the eco village is telling us is that we need to sort of reinvent and reimagine the old idea of the village in the modern era, right?
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to upgrade my Zoom as you were speaking so we can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I think it'll keep going, won't it? Mine just runs on when I do it. But okay. So do you want me to just keep talking right now?
Yeah. I'm working against the clock, trying to
Sure.
buy it.
Well, I'll just keep talking. We can do this again if we need to. But you get the general idea. So basically, what it all gets down to is the idea that if you want to be in harmony with life and create eco villages is the impeccable, par excellence model for doing that. Now, if you use that reference point of the cell and look at that in terms of evolution, you can see that evolution doesn't proceed with one cell, right?
Yeah.
It takes multiple cells and clusters of multiple celled organisms to produce the sort of level of sophistication of the biodiversity of life that we have that actually gives us sustainable evolution of biodiversity on planet Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So in order for us to proceed down that
So
path
complex.
of sustainable, complexity. And
That's...
so in order for us to proceed down that path of complex evolution, we don't just want one eco village, but we want a lot of them. And the question became to me, okay, how many is enough, right, in order to produce the effect? And the super shorthand version is 144,000. Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay, so we left off at the 144, which was the perfect way to leave off. So
yeah.
Tell us about the 144,000. What is that number? What is the relevance of that number?
Well, 144,000 is a number that has a number of different reference points. And so when I was looking for a number that would be the appropriate number to express the expanded sort of Eco Village model, I remembered something that I had heard from this the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce. And in his book, I don't know, are you familiar with Edgar Cayce, Shanti?
Yeah, a bit.
So here's a book where he decodes and explains the book of Revelation, which, you know, for me and every other person on the planet, unless you're a super high frequency, you know, whatever, guru, yogi, mystic, it's really unintelligible. I mean, it's very difficult to understand because it's all written in the symbolic language of the soul. So, and people have tried to decode it. And if you look at what Edgar Cayce says, and then if you look at what Steiner says, I mean, their interpretations make sense to me. It's on a whole different level. When people sort of try and run it through a political filter and, you know, Russia's going to do this and China, I think it just loses its meaning, right? But anyway, so in the Edgar Cayce version, the 144,000 number referred to what happens in the process of awakening and enlightenment as per the nadis and the Kundalini going through or the whole electromagnetic, you know, system of all the different meridians and so forth in the human body. What happens is that there is a point in the spiritual awakening of a human being in a given lifetime. It doesn't happen in every lifetime by any means. There's a point in that development where something happens, something is awakened, and 144,000 cells within the human body, of which there are something like between 50 trillion and 100 trillion cells. But to create a field of 144,000, what that does is it anchors in to the human being an access to higher level consciousness. Call it Christ consciousness or Vishnu consciousness, the consciousness of what in yogic terms is called the sushumna, the central column. So to be able to access that, you know, very at will, it anchors in 144,000 cells into this light grid. And so I just thought, you know, I'm looking for a number that would adequately express this concept of the fractal of the Eco Village as a cellular model. And I thought, well, you know, Edgar Cayce says 144,000. Let's try that on for size. And it just kind of felt right to me. And then I discovered that there are a whole lot of other references for this 144,000 number. It comes up in the Muslim religion, in Islam. It's in the Hopi prophecies, 144,000 warriors of light. You know, rainbow warriors are going to come. So it's
Shambhala warriors.
okay. It's in many different traditions, and so I sort of got a little bit interested in this 144,000. I thought, I wonder if it's in sacred geometry, and indeed, apparently, it is. So, according to the Buckminster Fuller Chronicles, that's a word I made up, but you know, the knowledge of Buckminster Fuller. And a guy called Dan Winter, who's a guy who's a really amazing genius on sacred geometry. He's got talks on YouTube if you want to look him up, Dan Winter. He says that the 144,000, as per Buckminster Fuller, is this thing called the vector equilibrium. And what the vector equilibrium does, it's the 144,000 anchors in the paradigm. It anchors in the energy. So it just is like 144,000 cells in the Book of Revelations in Edgar Cayce's model anchors in the higher consciousness. So it gives the individual access to the higher consciousness. You with me?
I'm writing it down, yeah.
The idea of the 144,000 cells is that is what can anchor in the new paradigm. So that then gives us, excuse me for a moment. I'm sorry, I'm online doing a recording. Thank you. So it's out there playing with the dogs and laughing loudly.
Higher consciousness, hey?
So yeah. So that 144,000 in terms of the cellular model. So basically what's going on there is that you know, it's important to understand, how is it that the cell or the eco village, in terms of looking at that as a fractal, is able to actually deliver the new paradigm, right?
Mhm. Wow.
And well,
Interesting. So just recapping so far, the 144,000 is 144,000 cells represent the anchoring in of the higher consciousness, so that can help us. So your vision is to sort of help us move into a new paradigm, the new earth, all that sort of thing.
well, yes, and by
Ideally.
extension, yeah, I mean, by extension, if you think about just playing a little mind game there, a thought experiment. I mean, if you think of, well, why do people want to get into eco villages, right? Or why bother? Well, what you'll generally find is that they are trying to bring in the new paradigm.
Yeah. Well, I think
People,
there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of people have different
well,
reasons.
they have a myriad of reasons, but
Yeah.
it all basically becomes the old model of doing things is a bit crap, and we want to create something different.
Yeah.
Okay. If you scratch a person that says, I want to get into an eco village, they're going to say things like this. Oh, we
Yeah.
want to learn to live in harmony. We want to have a better socially cohesive, fabric. We want to, we want to eat better food, like we want to have organic food. We want to educate our kids in a different way. It starts looking a bit like, it sort of generally kind of starts looking a bit like Steiner education, not necessarily exactly that, but
Yeah.
along those lines of a different sort of educational, not just being, programmed or brainwashed by the state in that particular state education. This is how people are thinking. We want to have clean energy, right? And so really what they're looking at is this is my preferred vision of life on Earth, and it's a bit futuristic, right? It's like we're looking at how we want life on Earth to be, and we could go forward and we could just say, oh, maybe in 150 or, maybe 50 years or 100 years or 150 years, but sometime in the future, we're going to get to this Earth where we all sing Kumbaya and we've got peace, muesli and combi vans and we live in peace, love and happiness. That is essentially the model where and that's being a bit flippant. But if you want to put that in a sober, sort of deep sense, you could say, well, we want to live in harmony with the earth. We want to live in a deeper relationship with the planet. We want to have more cohesive, meaningful social interactions. We want to respect the temple of the body by putting good food in it that's,
Yeah.
biodynamic or organic. We want to bring up our kids with a whole new
But
sort of way of doing
yeah, well, I'm just going to just interrupt if that's all right for a second,
this.
because my experience of eco villages so far in Australia, at least where we are at the
Good.
moment in the
Yep.
Northern Rivers, has been such that while these ideals have been the conception,
Yes.
at the conception and the initial you know what do I want to say, the inspiration for the
Yes.
eco villages themselves,
Yes.
in reality it has not played out that way.
Yes.
It's played out now, and in a lot of these places, unfortunately, very unfortunately, people are just doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm quite happy with that. And a lot of the times it's because of political falling out with each other, over money and often roads. So how, just getting into the nuts and bolts of your vision of the eco village,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way that beyond like you say, kumbaya and the fluffy like spiritual stuff, which I find super interesting, by the way, but just as an aside, to address these really complex but basic issues
Mm-hmm.
in a way of survival, money, all these things that are part of the system that we still have to live with. You know, we still drive cars, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
We should be in spaceships by now, but anyway, we should be flying around, free energy.
Bring on the flying car,
My
mofo.
God, come on. Like
Right.
magnetic cars were flying around years
Absolutely.
ago.
Or at least, you know, solar powered roller skates, right?
Yeah.
With disco
Yeah,
lights.
Marty, come on, Marty.
Come on, Marty.
Let's
What are we
do
going to
it.
do? We've got to fix the quantum wobulator. People are smoking too much pot and lying around and fighting. What are we going to do, Marty? So, yeah,
Yeah.
well, so there's that. So I then would, so it's a very good question. And that is, you know, the subject of a couple of decent books, no doubt. And, you know, a few years worth of workshops.
And that's where we met. Just also, I forgot to say in the
Indeed.
beginning that that's how I met you about
Yeah.
15 years ago, 16 years ago, at a workshop giving a talk.
That's right, about this very subject.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how we know each other.
That's how we know each other. So, you know, the answer is basically this. You know, we pull back and we take a broad view and we look at all that and we say, well, first thing, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? The New Age architecture isn't going to fall into place overnight. But if we can understand the primacy of the model, which is why I go to all the trouble of explaining in system terms and quantum terms and in evolutionary the butterfly effect, which is also known as the chaos theory, or chaos theory also known as the butterfly effect. If we can understand what all the modeling actually tells us, then we can get to a point of what I might call, or what a great guru once called, you know, the holy jumping off place. You know, we get to that point, yeah, you know, we get to that point and we look down into the valley of all the shit zone of, you know, infighting and the squabbling and the people that are, you know, fighting over roads and should we have dogs and should not, and we're going to just have it like, you know, pure Australian bush or, you know, local biodiversity. And, you know, it's a million and one things that people can argue about, right?
So many things.
But you know, why that's important, that's actually an important part of the story. I mean, I think it's probably a good idea as we embark on the adventure of the new community living model, if we could call it that. You know, so we get to the holy jumping off place. Let's just say we're on a high ridge and we're overlooking all that stuff. And we're going, well, we're going to dive down into that and we're going to engage, right, with the process. So I think it's important to understand that it is going to be a journey. It is going to be a process. It's not necessarily going to happen in my lifetime. It's certainly probably not going to all happen in 5 years or 10 years. And that's why I have said what we need to do is we need to have a view of, well, we're going to create 144,000 of these, what I would call new enterprise evolutionary eco villages. New enterprise, let's find a new way to do the business thing. That would be not necessarily the old dog eat dog capitalist model. If we want to take a, you know, what you know is called in a certain sort of theory, the dialectic, Hegelian dialectics. If we want to take the dialectic and say, well, the old model was dog eat dog capitalism versus, you know, iron-bound socialism, communism. That was the old polarity.
Yeah,
that was the old polarity.
It's like a two-party system, right? It's like, no, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, it was, but you see that why the polarity is useful is that, you know, it's like in script writing and writing a story. If you sit down to watch any film that you're going to, you know, that they spent millions of dollars on and that you're going to pay, you know, $10 or $20 to go and see at the movies, the story moves on points of tension. There's always tension. The story, if you sit down and everybody's singing Kumbaya and everybody's happy, you're going to get bored in the first 5 minutes and walk out. Oh, this is a boring movie. You know, there's got to be this tension That's how the story, that's how the plot, that's what keeps you on the edge of your seat. That's what keeps you glued to the seat.
I guess I'm a bit I'm impatient because I feel like we only really have about 5 or 10 years to get
Well,
this
that's what people used
done.
to say 20 years ago, and here we are. So, what I would say is that,
I think it's more urgent at this point.
well, that's fine, but
Yeah.
I think you have to temper your enthusiasm with a little bit of practicality, and you have to say, all right, well, what can I do? And this is where, having a good amount of spiritual training in terms of a depth of scriptural understanding of like what the heck's going on in the world is helpful. And so I would draw one's attention, anyone who goes down that vortex, you want to go down that whirlpool, to the Bhagavad Gita, right? The imperishable spiritual science of yoga presented, from the Hindu tradition. One of the
Can you
greatest.
just give us a quick synopsis of
Yes,
how
I'll
that
give you the
would
quick
apply?
synopsis. The basic tenet of the Bhagavad Gita, which is, it's quite complex, and you can look up Rudolf Steiner's reading on the Bhagavad Gita, very instructive. But the basic model there is, look, do your duty, right? Follow the holy dharma, and that can look different in different societies at different times. But the basic thing is there's two sides to the equation of life. One is you can't do anything, everything's already done by the will of God, right? Everything you can imagine is already done. We're living in a thought bubble in the mind of God. So there's nothing you can do. That's one side of the equation. And there are people out there who will say, oh, you haven't got any problems. As soon as you start saying you've got a problem, well, you've got to just affirm that you're a spiritual being and you've got all the answers. It's all in that area of just surrendering to the fact that it's all actually going by the will of the Supreme. That's one side of it. But the other side of the equation presented in the Bhagavad Gita is, and here's the paradox, even though everything's already done, even though the outcome is already assured, and I say that very positively in the current milieu, right? You still should, in order to live a happy life and to be self-actualizing, and to use Maslowian psychological terms here, if you want to be a productive, fulfilled ego and feel that you're on the right path and you're doing things successfully, then you've got to do shit. You've got to do some shit. You've got to act. You can't just sit around staring at your belly button, right? And this is where the two halves come together in the infinity of, understand that everything's fine. You are as cool as a cucumber. Chill out, homie. That's thing number one, right? Thing number two, you have got to get your ass into gear, get your A into G, and make some shit happen. But here's the proviso, here's the fine print on that. Don't be attached to the outcome. That's the basic Bhagavad Gita model.
Yeah.
You have to do your duty, but don't be hanging out there going, oh, when are we going to get a result? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Because if you're in that mode, you're actually going to stop it from happening. You've just got to get in the chill zone and get in the make it happen zone, and be dancing. That infinity symbol, that's a dance between knowing deeply, transcendentally, that everything's taken care of and it's all good, and tuning into that, and knowing also you're a human being in time and space and you've got stuff to do.
And you have free will too. That's always the game changer in any
So
system.
profoundly true in terms of that whole framework. Well, that's doing my head in trying to figure out, well, everything's already taken care of by the will of the Supreme, but I've got free will. How do those two halves fit together? Well, they fit together by you getting into the zone with doing what turns you on. If you look at it, in Bashar's kind of model, do what you're passionate about. Do what's true. Be authentic. All this type of stuff, all these sort of messages.
Yeah, like I feel like with this right now, what we're doing, this is self-actualizing. Like this is
Self-actualizing.
so passionate about it.
Yeah. But so do what are you, so if living in community and creating an eco village and doing all that stuff is what you're passionate about, and plenty of people are, then do that to the best of your ability. And I would suggest that if you really want to do that to the best of your ability, if you're a person with above average intelligence, and in terms of IQ scores, 100 is the average. So like if you've got an IQ of above 100, and anyone tuning into this probably has, right? Then if you're passionate about eco villages, what that means is you're passionate about creating the new paradigm on planet Earth. That's what it means. So
whether you have dogs, whether you have money, whether you want to do permaculture versus increase the biology of the area, the native fauna, flora, all those things, maybe people just have to work out, find those tribes within each area and decide
yes,
to work together with those
yes,
people that you resonate with, I guess.
yes. And also, yeah, good. And I extend it over into another area too in terms of life. And I'd say, well, if you've got a good brain to think with and so forth, and you understand that there's a lot of power and knowledge, maybe acquiring knowledge in the area of your passion, whether it's, community workshops and how to get transformation of, in consciousness, or if it's in business, or, understanding marketing and business. I think there's a lot of art for culture in business, and this has been observed by a lot of people who are part of this whole alternative hollow movement towards creating the new. Some of the biggest names have said, well, the big change that if we're going to do it, it's going to be in business. And if you look at some of the most interesting people, that have been through, the Osho scene or the Hare Krishna scene, they get into these really interesting businesses.
Yeah.
They start up food businesses, and they start up healing businesses, and they do building, and they do all sorts of amazing things.
Do you
There's
know Michael New, who
Yes,
started
yeah, he's
Wild?
up here somewhere. He's up here. He lives up in Mullaney. Last time I looked, he actually recorded me at a talk I gave up in down at Noosa Junction at the J that Jimmy Hurst hosted an eco village and tiny homes festival on.
Yeah.
So it's looking at, well, what area of specialization might I get? Not everyone has to go off and do a higher degree, but I would say if you're really passionate about eco villages and about permaculture and organics and biodynamics, there's so much to learn,
To
to
start somewhere.
to
Yeah.
bring and to sort of just have a commitment to the long view of, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to be committed to being committed, is how I put it as a coach. I say, well, you can be committed, and then if you fall over within a week or a month or a year, and people sometimes do, don't give up feeling that you're a failure. Have this outer shell of your electron orbit, and in the valence of, the frequency of your commitment is, well, even if one shell of my commitment fell over, like I didn't turn up, that week or that day or that month or whatever, don't damn yourself. Just have a commitment to remaining committed. And if it's worth doing, then it's worth committing your whole life to. Like, that's the whole future of life on Earth. That's how I would put it.
So you've committed your life to this?
Well, yes, in the sense that once I've seen it, I can't unsee it. And so that's what I've devoted myself to, is to creating the evolutionary living fractal model that I developed as a result of my, download, as a coaching system of self-transformation. And that's these days, that's called the total success system. That's my primary delivery model for it. And then there is the model of eco villages. And, I've sort of been wandering around as where I met you, giving these talks, right?
Yep.
And talking about it.
And I did some of your coaching as well.
You've done some of my coaching. Well, I've advanced the coaching to the point where I did spend a couple of years working with a business coach and putting it into a much more business-like framework. So whereas the coaching we were doing before was a little bit unstructured, I still had a structure, but now it's tightly packed into 12 sessions. I suppose you could call it my flagship program, the Total Success System.
Yeah.
And so that works extremely well for people who want to create success in every area of their life in a sustainable way.
Okay,
right?
so can you give a few ideas of how people can create success? And I assume you by success you mean making money, making a living, having what you need. So can you give us a few examples of, ethical ways to do that? Because as it stands now, the most money that people make usually has to do with abusing resources of this planet, which is how
Yep,
we've grown the
yep,
civilization.
yep. So in order to do that, yes, I'm happy to address that, but in order to do that, we have to avoid putting the cart before the horse, which is what mostly happens. When you ask someone how to do something, they will usually come up with the materialistic or the materialist solution, which is the backwards solution. Okay. So I
Okay.
have to really address that at this point and say, look, the least effective way of doing it is to do it in terms of structure first. But you see, the challenge here is that structure has to be there. You can't do it without the structure. But what we typically tend to do is, well, when people want to build an eco village, what they'll tend to do is they'll go, well, we're going to get the land, we've got this vision, and we're going to divide it up, and there's going to be lots, it's going to cost us this much money, and everyone's going to have a share. And that's like, well, first of all, just to have a recognition that what you're doing is you're simply reproducing the old model by doing that. Right, but you're just chunking out the old paradigm in what you've just described. Within you, your inner sense, your innocence, inner sense is that, oh, I want to create the future. Beautiful. But your ignorance in your innocence is you're going to do it by recreating the past. It's not going to work. That's why, when you look down from the valley and you see all everybody fighting about this, that, and the other, and not getting on with washing the baby, and you think, well, oh, geez, this eco village thing, it's not all it's cracked up to be. But it's not that. It's not that the eco village isn't what it's cracked up to be. It's that people are just, you can
Approaching it
design
that way.
approaching wrong. You can design all the things. You can have all the sustainable housing and clean energy, and you can do all that and put in all the clean, ride a bicycle and grow vegetables, and still end up reproducing the past, right?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I've been involved in these things where you
uh,
exactly
yeah,
that, and it
exactly
hasn't
that.
worked out.
Right.
So
So what is the
what is it?
answer? So the answer is we've got to pull back. We've got to go wide out in the zoom, pull back, and we've got to see the big picture. And the big picture is this: that the physical, sorry,
I'm all ears.
okay, and this is something that people just don't want to hear. I've telling this to people for decades, and when I tell them this, they go, "Oh, it's too hard. I'm just going to do it the hard way." This is invariably what most people will do. They will revert to form. But I'll say it again, just in case you missed it.
Please.
So first things first, we've got to get things in order. If you want to cast a magic spell, you've got to have the right sequence. So let's get the sequence right if you want the magic. So the magic is this, that the material world, or let us say spiritual reality, if you've got one of those, is not the product of the interaction of molecules and chemistry, right? Which is how modern science has got it sort of figured. Oh, your mind and your brain and your conception of things and your higher dimensionality of your what might be called spirituality is just an interaction of the molecules and the chemistry of your brain. But you see, that is a model that is like over 100 years out of date, OOD. That one needs to be thrown in the bin. And because, modern, and this is where quantum theory sort of comes in. Quantum theory, which broke that old paradigm over 100 years ago, and why the old quantum theorists were sort of quite mystical often in their orientation. These were scientists, these were physicists, but when they discovered quantum theory, the mystery of quantum theory, they were like, oh my God, it's not what we thought. And so where it gets to, just scrunching all that down into a ball of, 10 or 15 years of quantum theoretical revolution down into a 3-second ball, is basically this, that the world didn't produce the thought bubble of spirituality from the world, what happened is that there's this other realm, this energy dense realm that looks like it's full of consciousness, call it God or whatever you want, right? That produced the hologram of the world. And why that's important.
Like they say everything's a hologram.
Everything's a hologram. You know, getting into quantum theory again, you know, one of the simple questions, if you shrink yourself down to the size of an atom, which is the sort of the quantum level, you know, assuming that there's good lighting, right? You shrink yourself down to the size of an atom. If there's good lighting, what do you see? And the answer is
Nothing.
nothing, right? Because at the quantum level, what there is there's not billiard balls, you know, as a nucleus and marbles spinning
A little
around
bit of
there.
energy, right?
It's just energy. It's
Little
just
spark.
electromagnetic. Yeah, what you might see if you're lucky is just a spark. You wouldn't see billiard balls and marbles. So what you see is nothing. And so the solid bits that we think of as the nucleus, the protons and the neutrons and the electrons, are made up of subatomic particles, which themselves are separated by a distance of, you know, 99.99999% space. And they themselves are just electromagnetic energies. So it's a whole lot of nothing. It's a hologram. And it's being brought in from the energy dense realm. It's pulsing in and out of manifestation of electromagnetic, you know, it's a vibration. It's happening, you know, millions of times a second in my understanding in terms of quantum.
And do you think it's affected by the vibration that we are giving out in terms of whether we're coming from a higher vibration or a lower vibration, say love versus greed, or
Oh, yes. Well, this is where precisely so. And this is where we start getting into the idea of multiple universes. So think of it like this. You know, we are in the same time and space in the hologram, but you see, if I'm in a different order of frequency and vibration, I'm in a different universe to you, as it were.
it feels
Right?
like that sometimes.
Yeah,
Can live
because
next door to someone that
exactly, they're in a different universe.
different
It's like
universe.
there's no alignment here. There's no resonance here. They're just an extra in my movie.
Yeah.
They're not really, I'm not in their universe. My cause and effect sequence, even my karmic reality, is so different to theirs. Right? I'm literally in a different universe. And how many different universes are there? And this is where it gets kind of really interesting if you want to look at it like this. So there are 7 billion people, roughly speaking, on the planet.
8, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
There was
8.
7 billion when I was in uni.
Yep, 7 or 8 billion people on the planet. Let's say 8, and there's 8 billion different universes.
At least, but now they're, as well as their past, their present, their future, all rolled up into one.
And the complexity of that is pretty mind-blowing, but you get the general idea is that everybody's got a different frequency, set of vibrations. And in quantum theory, again, you know, something only exists if you see it, right? You know,
in quantum theory.
In quantum theory, things only exist because you see them existing. And that gets back to, you know, wave particle duality. Because they're not there the way you're seeing them. See, you look out and you see a screen and you see, you know, a cupboard and a table and all that, but they're not there, right? They're just a cloud of, it's just a cloud.
So it's really the opposite though, isn't it? Because like the world of science here, this current science that we're sort of operating in this paradigm with, that's more like that. Like it only exists if you see it.
Yeah, and we can have a bit of fun with that in terms of, so if we look at first order of creation and how we got into this conversation in the first place, what I would say in terms of the Eco Village model is that in order for people to actually create the Eco Village that within themselves they desire, you know, deep down, oh, you know, I want the future. I want love. You know, I want people to be connected. I want compassion. I want forgiveness. I want understanding. I want people that really want to hug a tree. I want people that want to go deep into nature. I want all that stuff, right? And yet I look around me in the world and I see all this indifference and I see all this arguing and I see all this kind of this mixed up greed and sort of lower degrees of lust and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, ugh, that's not the world I want to create in the bubble of my eco village, in the womb of the creation in matter of the new thing I'm trying to create. And so therefore, I would say, first thing, in order to create the eco village that you want to create, first thing is to go from consciousness. And that might sound a bit woo-woo. Oh, how am I going to go from consciousness? How am I going to create from consciousness? Well, the first thing you do to consciousness, is a big word to a lot of people. Well, what's consciousness? It just means the level of what you're conscious at. Right?
Yeah, no, that's what Penny Kelly says is we've got to start. That's our starting point is raising our consciousness.
Raising our consciousness. And so the first thing in terms of creating from that level, and there's some really good modeling on this, from some very amazing, wonderful people who are right in our zone. The first thing is to see, well, okay, what is my vision? Because that's the higher level of consciousness. Right? What is my vision?
Intention as well.
Yeah, what's my intention? But what's my vision? What is that future thing that I'm envisioning? Mm. Oh, well, funny you should ask, right? Now you're asking, well, I think that it'd be great to live in a world where people felt safe to express their inner feelings without being ridiculed and shamed by others. Wow. Because up until now, in the culture that I've been in, the minute you express your inner feelings, there's always some dickhead that wants to drag you down. As soon as you want to start saying something deep or intimate or profound or wonderful, if you're in a group of people, unless it's set up as a workshop or whatever, someone's going to make a joke and they're going to burst the bubble.
Well, especially in this culture.
Especially in this culture.
Maybe not other cultures, but
maybe not. But so, and that means that, so right there, we can see that there is actually a space that can be created in which that can happen, in which that honest communication, in which authenticity can show up, in which I feel okay to be vulnerable.
It's a container.
It's a container. Now, that container could be a workshop, right?
Yeah. So you run workshops, or do you have intentions of doing that?
Yeah, I have done in the past. I thought I was doing it. It's a different one. But I've done this, do these little workshops. And we can do a little mini workshop now. It goes like this. You ready?
Yeah.
We can create. See, using this modeling, we can create 144,000 eco villages in under 1 minute. And you might think, oh, come on, you wanker. But let's just do it.
Let's give it a try. Go.
Let's try. Okay. So let's apply a bit of this, complexity modeling that I've been fiddling around with for the last 20 years. And let's use this higher level of consciousness, and let's apply a bit of quantum theory, and let's put it like this. Let's frame it like this. So in quantum theory, if you can see it happening, or if you can see something, you've just created it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let us just cognitively be aware of the fact that the eco village as a structure for living on Earth is now an emergent phenomenon. True or false? True. And you can see at the rate of the emergence of that phenomena within the hologram of life on Earth, that we probably will have 144,000 of these things by 2050, because the nature of an emergence is that it starts out with a very small number. This is the butterfly effect, chaos theory. We start out with a butterfly flapping its wings, and there's a hurricane in Texas. The hurricane is the 144,000. So if you can see that there will be 144,000 of these amazing eco villages by 2050. I mean, if you can just hold that in your field of possibility and believe in that, have faith.
Does it matter, like the details? Like if your version of these eco villages is different than mine?
No, it's just you just resonate. And this is part of the beauty of life, is that, if my resonance is in harmony with yours. So if you're an eco village wonk, like I am, and not a control dynamic wonk as someone else might be, right? Oh, we're going to have shutdowns, or we're going to lock you down, or we're going to have, we're going to have you with an ID, and we're going to control you, and if you don't conform, we're going to bloody fucking do this and that. That's the other model. Well, I'm not resonating on that model. Like, good luck with that. I think those people are going to get rounded up by the space rangers and thrown into the pits of hell. But that's not my problem. I'm not focusing on them. Right? I'm looking at, like Buckminster Fuller said, if you've got something better, don't criticize or go against the old model. Just focus on creating the new model, and eventually
Yeah,
the
I
old model will
agree.
become obsolete.
Just
So
leave it. Yeah.
in terms of the focusing, what we do is we create the vision, and I'm in harmony. I might not be in the exact resonance of frequency. You might be on 432 and I might be on, 249 or whatever, 440 or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But if we're in harmony, we'll coexist we'll create, we'll co-create, we'll synergize. And so it's a matter of really, in the first instance, creating a paradigm. And creating a paradigm means the worldview of what that is. So if you get a group of people together and they can create the paradigm through, workshops, maybe, some sort of coursework, which could involve workshops. It could be a 1-year program, where you go through this process of creating the new paradigm. Now, here's an interesting thought for that coursework, for the new paradigm. Here's what I would say would be an essential feature of creating the new paradigm. Are you ready for this? Are you sitting down? Can you handle it? Because this is just going to explode the old model. It's like, oh my God, right?
Let's go. I can
Let's
handle
go,
anything.
baby. Fire all your guns at once and explode into space, because here we go, right? And it's basically this. What we're looking for, correct me if I'm wrong, is this model of living where we can simultaneously, right, uh, you know, be in harmony with what in Hindu terms would be called the Dharma, the law, the social order. So it's kind of like, well, I am going to conform to some kind of social contract or construct, but you see, I'm going to do it through choice. I'm going to do it not because I'm being forced at the point of a gun or some sort of social credit system or whatever, but I'm actually going to subscribe to it deeply and authentically because I'm actually very deeply invested in my consciousness in the new paradigm. And so this fractal, what I'm describing now is this point of you've got to be at choice. You've got to be able to function as a sovereign, independent being. You've got to be able to be, in the new paradigm, a free agent. But you've also got to be able to function in harmony with the social group.
The social group as in the people of your eco village, or you're kind of straddling the two worlds like we're doing now?
Good question. So that is, I think, one of the whole points of the Eco Village construct is that it creates a container within which you can conform with your social group. See, it's very hard for me to want to conform to some of the larger level orbits that are going on within the social group of society, which I think are, a bit sort of on the nose, a bit long in the tooth, need to be put out to pasture. What can I say?
Very all Aussie saying it's bullshit.
That's one way of putting it. So there's that, thing where I'm not really so excited about conforming to that social model. I do my
Of
best.
course, none. I don't think anyone watching to this
Uh,
point will be. So,
yeah. So I do
like,
my best
what
to
does it look
conform
like on the
to be a
ground?
law-abiding citizen and to do the right thing. But in a tighter focus of the Eco Village, one of the whole points and magics of the Eco Village is that it is actually possible. You see, we get a shot at creating a future in the present because of the social ecology of being able to work with 144, 150 people, between 50 and 150 people. It's called the Dunbar number. There's a name for it. Notice the 144 shows up again just at the level of the local village, 144 people. Basically, you get 150 and it becomes too unstable and they've got to form another cell. That's mitosis. You know, the cellular model is the biomimetic model is right there. So in terms of Eco Village and being able to work things out together, the opportunity is to work things out very coherently and profoundly as both an individual. Like, I'm an individual, I'm going to do what I want. Great. What do you want? Well, I want to grow organic vegetables, right? And I want to bring my kids up to be independent and thinkers. And I want to, I want to have a business where we create more of these wonderful eco villages. Maybe I'm out there selling a wonderful new system of a windmill, or putting solar panels and windmills and systems together with really good energy systems that you don't have to have some sort of super spaceship type of technology. It's just like low tech. We've got a lot of sun in this country, we've got wind. We can kick it off from there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's like the people who are creating that future, like, that's the sort of the technology, the types of technology they want to do. They want to create, grow good food. Maybe someone's into raising, alpacas or goats, or making goat's milk, or having a mycelium culture and making, mushrooms and creating leather out of mushrooms and all that sort of stuff, right? These are yoga retreats, workshop retreats. These are all the sort of businesses that work as a thought experiment. You go, oh yeah, that works as an eco village business model thing. Is creating new eco villages and running businesses that enhance living together in community. Those are all the sort of things that we can be doing together. And that can be done effectively, according to social theory, most effectively with a group of between 50 and 150 people. That's where the magic of the synergy happens for the group. But you see, one single cell, that's okay. But what we want is lots of them. And so how that would work is clusters of those eco villages, just like you have clusters of cells. Clusters of cells create organs or tissues and then organs. And what we want are clusters of eco villages. And the basic model is 150, between 50 and 150. And within those eco villages, what we would find is there's a natural tendency to also cluster in groups of, the natural number of a team is what? What's the natural number for a team?
I don't know, but I would guess 12.
Ah, yeah. Well, that's why we look at football teams, cricket
That's
teams, and all that.
that's a derivative of 144, isn't it?
Yeah, the 12 disciples. Exactly. 12, 12 is 144. So that, the geometry and the maths stack up there. But it's just a natural phenomenon. Like, you don't have to go out of your way to create that. It's already been created. See, the sacred geometry. And so part of the understanding of this is if you follow the sacred geometry of this, and you start getting aligned with this fractal of life's hierarchies, from the atom to the universe, and we're somewhere in between. When we put ourselves in that line of frequencies, what happens is a wonderful thing starts to happen. And that is this thing that is described in complexity as self-organization. And so when you are in harmony, with the Tao, right? When you are on the path and you're in harmony with life and you're vibrating at the frequency of life and love and sustainability, which is love, what's the only thing we can take with us? Right? Is the love that we produce. That's the only thing that's eternal. Everything else is going to fall away. So when we're on that path of being the expression of love by creating all these wonderful things, whether they're businesses or projects or forms that are expressions of that love, of that compassion, of that giving, etc., giving and receiving, and honesty and authenticity, then things sort of will happen in a wonderful, magical, creative, productive, merciful, beautiful way.
Yeah, they will just naturally flow when you're in alignment with the people with the same vision, I guess.
Yeah. And, that is not to suggest that what we're going to do is create utopia. I truly think that human beings, being expressions of, being very fourth ray energies, and a lot of people listening to this wouldn't know what that meant, but there's a lot of fighting and arguing that is part of our nature in the human family. That whole model of, the story moves along on the points of tension as conflict. And so therefore you've got this whole thing called conflict resolution, which is a wonderful thing to do inside an eco village, is to use the conflict, is to use the arguing and the fighting as a productive way to resolve our differences and, move to different levels of the resolution.
Non-violent communication, learning
Sounds
that.
good.
Good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yep. But so I'm saying that, it would be naive to suggest that, well, we're just going to walk out the door and start creating utopia. That might be the vision in the heart, and according to Rudolf Steiner, that point is probably not going to happen until somewhere around 2432 or something, that everyone's going to reach a point of enlightenment. Well, yeah, in other words, there's no chance to get bored, right? There's plenty of things to make and do, right? Before
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. And what do you want? You want to go off to Africa and, build wells and deliver education to people that really need it? I mean, what do you want to do?
I want to go help personally, I want to go help the orangutans where their forests are getting demolished for palm plantations.
Beautiful, right? Fantastic. But something other than just hanging around in the mall and eating fast food, right? As a way of self-expressing yourself and self-actualizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't haven't moved beyond the flat screen of that.
Yeah, that's why I would have to, I can see your point about 24. That's going to take another 300 years to get to.
Well, that's Steiner's measure.
Maybe,
it won't be until 24, I think it's 2430, maybe 24 something or other, that we actually reach the point where everyone wakes up, reasonably enlightened.
Wow.
One day, where we're all an enlightened collective of humanity.
Oh, I had a question for you. If you're finished with the creation, the outlining the creation of the eco village in your summary. Okay. Have you ever heard of Linda Goodman?
Oh, Linda Goodman's sun signs.
No, not that Linda Goodman.
Not that Linda Goodman. No.
This Linda Goodman talks a lot about the 144,000 original souls that then were fractalized out into the planet over time.
I haven't heard about that. That's another 144,000.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure if that's the 144,000 you meant, because apparently the original 144,000 are like had the Christ consciousness just within them as a natural implanted consciousness, I guess, coming straight from the source.
Right.
And then maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe they're the same people that have come back and agreed to be the Shambhala warriors, so to speak. Not so to speak, but in Joanna Macy's work, to come back and volunteer to come back into this time to do the work, this kind of work that we are doing, to raise the consciousness, to make the planet a better place, all that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's another.
Well, and it's just another example of that, and it's part of that whole vector equilibrium, and that's looking at it from a point of view of, the higher soul level of humanity. Maybe initially, and it makes sense, we were 144,000 great beings, that fractalized into the 8 billion people we are now.
That's what she said. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah,
it makes perfectly good sense, because I believe from one point of view of the grand arc of evolution, that we are all one great being eventually. Well, we're a long way off that now. So that's a beautiful, vision for some long distant future. But for now, we're just going to work shit out.
Yeah. So I always had the question, if everything's a hologram, how does that explain nature? And, because it almost makes it almost dismisses nature in a way, that bird creating, living in its hollow in a nest and creating these environmental services with what it does every day in its life, is that, that's just a hologram. So it almost dismisses the importance of that being.
Right. So I think you need to bring the beat back into the hologram now. Now that you've gotten rid of everything and disappeared the universe and turned it into a hologram, now you can bring the beat back. And now you can put
Boom,
everything, put
drop it
all the
like it's hot.
magic back into the hologram, and it's like, wow, all the interaction of all the plants and animals and the species of life and the evolution of life on Earth. There's this amazing dance, and what's happened there is that looks like spirit, has uh, invested itself into the depths of matter, which is actually a hologram, and has expressed itself as all these different forms, and that this was somehow the creation of some higher consciousness. This is my sort of broad understanding. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, or if you're listening, you don't have to agree with me. This is my way of understanding it. Is that oh, well, I've lost my place. Is that the that all of this stuff is going on. It is the creation from a higher order of consciousness. Now, traditionally, we've said, oh, that God created the world. All right, you could put it that way if you like. A lot of people don't like that. It reminds them of that, creepy, crappy fundamentalism. But when you go around the block with that a few times and you maybe study it from a number of different points of view, uh, it, I think particularly I like Steiner, Rudolf Steiner for this, but also the Hindu classics, the Chinese classics, different metaphysical systems. We understand that life is this incredibly diverse, profound, magical system of becoming. You can boil it all down in story form into Jungian terms of Joseph Campbell. Delivered to us this wonderful way of looking at it is that all the stories are just one story in essence, and all the stories are the story of us now on the arc of evolution, going from darkness, ignorance, to light. That's the story. That's the story of the Buddha. That's the story
So
of
the more you participate in the unfolding of life and the magic of life, however that looks for you, and like follow your instincts and your intuition and your flow, then the more that story unfolds in a positive way for you and for life, all of life, would you say?
yes. It's the way to look at that. I believe this is how I like to look at it. Is that the story and all the details of the story? Like you've got your story, I got my story, and it's all basically the same story because at the end of the day, there's only one of us here, which is a beautiful thing that Neil Donald Walsh presents. There's only one of us here, right? And so, therefore, who is the original person? Well, you are, and so am I, and so is every one of the 8 billion people on this planet. We're all the original person, right?
That's deep, man.
Well, there's only one of us here. And so, what is the point of resonance? What's the vector equilibrium of that? It's the point where we reach a certain harmony of understanding, right? Which is something that can only be worked out in the conversation that we have between ourselves. Now, there are two sides. Again, the polarity of this, there are two sides to this polarity. One side of this polarity is the Eastern mystical view, how you wish to approach the reality of who we are and who I am, is you say, oh, okay, the Eastern mystical view, we start with the idea that God is, right? And that's all. It's just a big circle with a dot in the middle, and the dot in the middle is the only thing that matters. So we're not going to concern ourselves with all the things in the periphery, all the details. It's just Om Mani Padme Hum,
Yeah, but
and I'm there. But you see, for the
okay.
Westerner, the Westerner's like, yeah, all right, okay, I get it. We're all one, but I've got to get busy. I've got to pay the mortgage. I've got a business to run. I've got to turn up for work. I've got to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning. I've got to be at work at 9. I've got to punch the clock, whatever. There's all the details. So this is the polarity of the what I call the Western canon and the Eastern canon. In the Eastern model, it's like all is one, Om Mani Padme Hum, beautiful. But in the Western canon, we're getting into science and we're getting into specificity. And so I would say, just scrunching that all down into a ball, if you're a Westerner, by all means, refresh yourself with the reminder of that we're all one. That's beautiful. But now get back on your bike and get busy with being a Westerner. So, you know, we need to build 144,000 eco villages. Well, maybe you can just build one, right?
Start with one.
And what skills do you want to bring to that? But we need skills. We need people with skills to come into that enterprise and, you know, be devoted to that vision. Doesn't mean you can't build a business and make profit and do all that. Doesn't mean you have to live in a communist manifesto of reality. I think what it means is that this is why it's important to step back and have a worldview of we're creating the future in the present. We're creating a better world, and we can do it. We've got a shot at doing that within a group of people because we can change our socio-dynamic model. We can change our business model. The basic model for business in the new paradigm has already been given to us, the term fair trade. Right? Right? That's the global model for it, but it's like ethical, equitable trade. Right? And what I like about that is that in the fair trade model, if someone fronts up to the door of the eco village and says, hey, I want in, right? I've been a bum. I've been a drug addict. I've been, you know, really cast out of society. I couldn't fit in, but I want to be part of your eco village. Then I reckon that that person, and it doesn't matter if they're a bum or a loser or, you know, a drug addict or, you know, in the social sense, or if they've come in the door with $1 million or somewhere in between. But the point is there should be a path for everybody, a fair trade path that gives people, as they invest themselves in that gives them equity in the business modeling of the eco village, fair trade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely that's been I've been involved with villages, including the village matrix, who's trying to nut out how to create a system for that. And how long have we
I'm
been
looking
going?
at the time. Well, I have to go. I have to get going. It's now
Okay.
3:15. I'm really behind the clock. But I'd love to do this again sometime. And what I'll do is I'll get the recording for this when it comes through. It'll come through on my email, and I'll just send you a link to the
Well,
recording.
we gotta stop the recording now. But well, don't stop it now. Just let's finish.
Okay.
Just hang on.
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly ask you. Well, we didn't really cover biomimicry, but
Well, biomimicry in terms of, well, the eco village is basically a mimic of the cell. Think of it like that.
yeah.
And if you want the quick chapter and verse on that, think of it like this: a cell has a nucleus. This is the way of solving the 180,000 simultaneous things. How do you do that? You break it down into 3 separate things. That's the simplest way of doing it, right? And you can go very simple and then you can become more complex from there. But the 3 simple things are the nucleus, and note that this is the same in the atom. Right? You've got a nucleus in the cell, you've got a nucleus in the atom. You've got a semi-permeable membrane in the cell, you've got a boundary. Same thing, you've got electron shells in the atom, you've got a boundary, right? And then you have the bit in between the nucleus and the boundary in the cell. That's called it's called the think of the name in a minute, but it is a name for it. And it's got all these organelles in it. Like that's right. It exists in a thing called the cytoplasm.
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't think.
And
All I could think of was mitochondria.
yeah, well, so in there's the mitochondria,
Yeah.
and there's the the Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum and all those, and so those things are making more cells. Those
Yeah.
180,000 processes are producing more proteins and components to make new cells. And so I would say that the best business to be in when you're in an eco village are community businesses where there's equity for the group who get involved for creating new eco villages. You see, that's the biomimicry model.
Okay.
Right.
So the whole idea is to start with one and then replicate it 144,099 times.
Yes, but before you start with one, you've got to get into your
I know.
subatomic level, right? You've got to get into the subcomponents, which means, first of all, before you try and build the eco village, well, that's your goal. But what we want to do as a process, as a thing that we do, is instead of just buying a land and doing that, we want to create a group. We want to create coherence of consciousness, which means we're a committed group.
Yeah, but what if people differ so much in values that they just drop off?
Well, you see,
That's what I see. It's like
but that happens.
it does
That
happen.
will happen. But
Well,
so the thing is, well, but how do you then create a group? So the question will become, and this is good, right? This is very creative because it presents a challenge and there's a problem and a challenge. And so to solve that problem and challenge is the way forward, right? That is the way forward. How do you create a group? Well, can I just say that online today, there are lots of groups. Lots of groups online.
can you name any for people?
Well, I mean, as far as Eco Village groups, there's Jimmy Hurst's group, Polka Dot Tiny. There's the Transition Towns communities. There's not, there's also, but they don't have to be groups. But I'm talking about groups that aren't necessarily just Eco Village groups. What I'm saying is there's lots of groups which might be described as, communities of practice.
Yeah.
So it's possible to create a community.
There's the degrowth people as well.
Yep.
Good.
So there's all these different communities. And so
yeah.
One expression of this is you don't actually have to do it as an eco village. I think that's what's going to happen and that's important. But there's another valence, there's another reality of doing it, and that would be creating groups of consciousness that might never become physical. And that's okay too.
Okay. Because my next question and my last question that was pretty important was land. Like land has gotten so expensive. How do people acquire land to do this?
Well, land isn't that expensive. Like if you get
if it's
people,
really far out, it's not. I guess.
But if you get 50 people together and they pool their resources, they can buy land. But then you're going to run up against things like the council.
Yeah.
And the laws of the land. It's not so much the price of the land. You're dealing with the laws of the land. We're not allowed to do. We won't let you build that here and all that. But hey, there's a conversation here because there's a freaking housing crisis. So where are all these people going to live? Oh, we want to put them in these little bloody ticky-tacky boxes of, developments, housing developments.
Yeah.
Well, what if I don't want to live in a box?
Or smart cities.
Smart cities and boxes. Well, that's one way of doing it. And so the Eco Village model is another way, and people are working it out. There are eco villages happening. It is happening all over the world. One way of doing it is to move to Russia. They encourage it there, but you've got to move 30 kilometers away from the next nearest big town.
Okay.
So you've got to
live I mean, a lot of it is to do with waste, water, and all that. So it is understandable in a way because a lot of people can cut corners, be cheap about it. A lot of people here don't even harvest their own rainwater. I mean, it's like that lack of responsibility or the NIMBY syndrome where if in the last drought in Nimbin, people were sucking the last drops of water out of their local creeks and just selfishly using it for themselves in their own houses, and they don't even have water tanks.
Sorry to laugh. Yes. Well, look, bottom line, if you want to create it, first of all, create it at the level of the mind. Now, I'll give you a tip. Would you like me to give you the hint on this? But this is really one of the keys now.
Okay.
There's two levels of mind. There's lower mind and there's higher mind. Right?
Is that why you were laughing?
Possibly. But to understand this, the lower mind and the higher mind are chalk and cheese. Right? Chalk and cheese. So lower mind is the mind that we use when we go into university and we study, so-called science, that sort of material. We're engineers and we're doctors and we're accountants and we're lawyers. All that's all what would be called lower mind. Now there's lower and upper. There's middle, lower and upper of the lower mind. You could be on a lower mind and a higher lower mind, but this lower mind is dealing with all the hologram stuff of like the nuts and bolts of the hologram, right? It can be very sophisticated, but it's all lower mind. Higher mind is where you create the paradigm, right? Higher mind, when you go to higher mind, and you can go to higher mind pretty quickly. You ready? We'll do a little workshop. We'll go into higher mind. Here we go. So just take 3 deep breaths into the second chakra and down into the earth, from the earth into the second chakra. And then just gently squeeze the second chakra and push that apana down into the earth. Bring the prana up to the second chakra and push the apana down. And you find that when you're doing that, your mind starts to relax and you let go of all the stuff, doesn't it? You just become very relaxed. Your mind just naturally lets go of all its tension. And down. Now, this time what we're going to do, and this is a very quick way of doing this, right? This is not the way I do it normally, but this is a quick way. Bring it up to the second chakra. And now bring it up to the heart. And just imagine that there's a toroidal resonance that goes through the middle of the heart. So like a donut of resonance, of electromagnetic resonance going through the heart. And just say to yourself, the beauty and the love of the universe is flowing through me. Right? Beauty and the love of the universe is flowing through. The center of my heart is a jewel of love. The center of my heart is a jewel of love. And you can say, I radiate peace, love, forgiveness, and understanding to all living beings. Radiate peace, love, joy, forgiveness to all living beings. And my heart is a garden of peace in which many flowers bloom. Heart is a garden of peace in which many flowers bloom. Now I'm in universal consciousness, higher mind. You with me?
Yeah.
And from that point of higher mind, it's very easy from the point of higher mind to simply say to yourself, as the original person, as the center of your universe, to simply feel that you do forgive everybody. Would that be true?
Definitely easier to do it in that
Easier,
time,
yeah.
right?
In the state of universal consciousness, it's not that hard to forgive. In the state of universal consciousness, it's easy to conceive of the future that you would like, with a beautiful community and the gardens and the flowers and the buildings and all that stuff. It's there now. We can be with it now. And that is why, if you simply see that there is 144,000 eco villages by 2050, you've just created it. You can do that in 1 minute. True or false?
Yeah, I remember when we did our coaching, you were leading me through a lot of visualization, and that was sort of the primary premise of your coaching methods.
Yeah. Well, then within that, there is also what we call the project management concept, because that's where we get our A into G and we're going to do stuff. But see, the key there for me as a coach is that I'm not here to tell you what to do.
Yeah, you have to envision it and then come up with your own plan of management.
But I can give you the framework, I can give you the project management concept, but
Yeah.
you have to pour yourself and your heart and your desire into that. Like, well, what is it through the process of my clarification of who I am and who I choose to be? Now, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
And it's not up to me
So
to tell
can
you.
people can come to you if they want to go through that process, if like say they get a group of people together, or even just one are really passionate about starting an eco village, they can either hit you up or try to
Yeah, I mean,
do
people
it
can ask.
themselves. Like
Yeah.
how can people find you, Simon?
Well, Simon X Bull on Facebook. Friend me on
Hmm.
Facebook and send me a messenger.
He's the only Simon X Bull on Facebook, as you
Only one. Simon
assured me.
X Bull. I'm the
Yeah.
only one. And you can ask me.
Do you
Now,
have a
I'm a coach.
website?
Sorry?
Sorry. Do you have
Not
a
at the
website?
moment. I'm building everything. I was about to do it all in Kajabi, and I've decided that there's a different platform. So I'm just sort of working with a developer to put it all up again, because I'm doing it. I'm setting it all up as my coaching and courses online in one flat platform. So
Okay.
there's no website there at the moment. But you can find me, and I
But
do have
you
coaching clients all over the world. I
okay.
do charge my services. I don't do it for free. I
Yeah.
do actually do some pro bono coaching, and I do pro bono coaching to a group of women in Pakistan because they are underprivileged in terms of the fair trade of their dollar to ours is like they're at a massive disadvantage. So I do work into Pakistan. I have this village of creating this thing called the Women's International Development and Education Foundation. And I want to extend that model to the whole world, where we're able to actually bring education, coaching and development and give those opportunities to women in, wherever it might be, India, Africa, Pakistan, South America,
so, Yeah. So you're on Facebook, and you're very public about your posts, right? Simon does a lot of really interesting blogs, actually. His posts are like blogs with really good graphics. I actually got my Earth-Centric graphic from one of Simon's posts.
Okay.
Yeah, the lady with the scales, wondering, nice. Weighing up what's more important, riches or the earth, So, yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, so you're welcome to come on and friend me and talk to me on Facebook. I coach. I use Zoom for the coaching sessions, and I charge. But there's something I do that's for free that people might be interested in as a way of introducing people to my work. I'm very into astrology. And there is a thing I do called the Jupiter Success Keys reading.
Okay.
And I do a free Jupiter Success Keys reading. Now, I'm about to start charging $27 for that. But at the moment, it's still
That's
free.
Fair.
If by the time you get to me, I've put the price up to $27, there's nothing I could do about that. Once the price goes up, it goes up. But at the moment...
Maybe they can mention Earth-Centric for a discount.
Oh, yeah. At the moment, on the 31st of August, it's free. But anyway, it's basically looking at the Jupiter placement in your chart as the par excellence path towards creating success in your life. And it's not just success materially, although that is important and you want to know about that. It's looking at it both materially and metaphysically, spiritually. So Jupiter is the key. Jupiter in the ancient, world was, Zeus. He was the king, the main god. Jupiter is, very, very important. We've tended to look simply at sun, moon, and rising.
So you look at people's Jupiter, what sign their Jupiter is in?
Jupiter key. That is the key. If you want to create success in your life, but either materially or spiritually, Jupiter is the planet. So once I sit down, someone look with Jupiter for them, it's like, oh, the light goes on. It's like, oh my God. And very often what they will find is that it doesn't have to be that hard, does it? Once you understand
that's
what
the beauty of
Jupiter
astrology.
key is.
It's like, it unlocks your own blueprint.
Well, the Jupiter key does this so beautifully because people will think, the first thing that people think when they see the Jupiter key, I've been pushing in the wrong direction to try to create my success. And I'm not just talking about some sort of, don't worry about the material thing, just worry about your spiritual success. No, it's both sides of the equation. Anyway, Jupiter Success Keys.
Jupiter Success Keys.
And then after that, there is an upgrade that people can do, and they can pay more for that if they want. And then from there, if people want to do my coaching, the Total Success System, they can do that. And that's substantially more than all that. But anyway, so there it is. That's what I do.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Simon.
Thank you, Shanti.
Yeah, super interesting conversation, especially for my very first YouTube.
Well, far out. Well, I hope we get to do it again. I don't know if this is all going to go out as is or as was, but if you want to do it again, we can do it again. You can see there's some good stuff in there. I think that people can grab hold of and use.
Yeah.
Ideas and stuff.
Yeah, great. Well, here's to 144,000 eco villages.
Namaste.
Now in the future.
Namaste, home girl.
Namaste, Simon.
See you, Shanti. Bye, Dal.
Bye.